Why review a movie? To tell of its information that is received by me, as someone who knows for certain what it is his mind is receiving through knowing the intent of moral of story. I call it perception analysis, using this perception technique that filters all information to be only accepted if it's useful by the means of benefit. No one wants a movie spoiled, but I'm not telling you what happens. I'm telling you the information I'm receiving, perceive the best possible way to have the movie give us value as long as possible. The meaning is there, and who knows, maybe those who become afraid needed to perceive the movie, and they feel afraid because it means more to them at that moment than others. This movie has a creepy vibe to it. I hope you felt it. I'm not thinking for you because that would be a full-time job you pay me for. Following you as if I'm your mind. That's a movie to write, eh? Following you as if I'm your mind. No, I'm showing you what began to happen to me a few years back with songs, movies, and books. To not only receive the story, but hear what the creator is possibly implying. Your best tactic is to accept the most profound meanings possible. Be the psychic transmission you already are using language. You may not want to watch a movie again without knowing. Here we are, the movie Knowing. Skipping the girl writing in the capsule for now, we're in class, and Nicolas Cage is our teacher. You can assume that you are here on Earth living as a result of randomness, that it just happened without will. As lots of things do happen on accident, bad or good accidents, on Wikipedia, randomness introduces itself as this. Randomness is the apparent or actual lack of pattern or predictability in events. A random sequence of events, symbols, or steps often has no order and does not follow an intelligible pattern or combination. Individual random events are, by definition, unpredictable, but if the probability distribution is known, the frequency of different outcomes over repeated events or trials is predictable. So, is defining an event as random, assuming complete control is in store for us each because exclaiming something random is something you can't predict? Is predicting something meant to be a two-sided story because one side is predicting and the other side is random? Is something random able to know, to predict, or consider the outer world? How much time for detection to record what you detect do you or all of us have to consider the probabilities of something to be random right now to be certain if everything identified is random or not? The capacity you'd waste would only wait for something random to happen as it would differ from all that's identified previously. But novelty isn't randomness, including everything you haven't seen yet. Randomness as a definition should be redefined with it being a very bad thing specifically that hasn't been considered to happen, therefore it randomly arises out of nothing. But randomness being what we cannot predict, that's also a true enemy of life, for life is good and life isn't random. To take everything happen by randomness is saying you don't want to explain or sit there and think of it. Or it's a solution giving those who believe humanity is naturally malicious and murderous a category to fit in to consider themselves the reason we got here. If that's a trait genetically, then not allowing one to keep it active allows that trait to be identified instead of awakening dormant at the last minute, having surrendered to good to only betray in the end. Life is good and randomness is not, but children take it seriously and say we are randomness, thus behaving anti-randomly until they can spawn randomly with something random to the last generation. Is that it? Probably not, but it seems as if calling something random and throwing them in the pile of many that are random makes randomness all the things you are not knowing. For this knowing being, all that you observed and come to know to be true isn't random because you know what it is. Every year your mind records more information that is no longer randomness because you hold it, and if you aren't randomness, then what you know isn't. Randomness is tricky, but you still have to think of it because the introduction to the scientific world is telling you the world we know evolutionarily happened randomly. Next thing you know, you're analyzing everything possible while including the randomness subjectively as things arise randomly when and you add something new that isn't random to the whole. So randomness are those who cannot accept the new thing added to their reality, assisting their entire world, making them randomness the whole time. Where else does this randomness come from? Is it all one man on a high seat who started to separate all life with randomness and probable within the already probabilities not taken from the already existing probabilities that have began to occur, reborn from randomness into intelligible patterns? Mainstream and occult history together suffering randomness. Randomness being the foe that continues to rise, so we defeat the randomness to arrive once more to continue goodness. Because for all I know, you are randomness, not following a particular intelligible pattern as evidence suggests. And being random is the only way you can unknowingly repeat harmful activities without being forced to. But we all arrived here through randomness. But then again, you wouldn't be coincidentally in the perfect spot to revolve yourself to begin exactly the same thing the earth began to do as a ball of water and lava and some algae. The very ground to create, as we are now all global citizens. As that is true, is it your conscious position because you're knowing, or unconscious position because you don't know that you are therefore to be considered still randomness? So maybe my lineage has been battling your randomness lineage for eons for the right to the earth. We've been waiting to strike the randomness once and for all. My relatives are those who are knowing. I'm assuming my relatives have identified their opportunity to create many of a million ideas utilizing the planet's resources. If not able, you still randomly breathe, eat, and so forth comes the unstoppable random things. That knowing has not the capacity to order randomness into only particular intelligible patterns, since you aren't good enough to transition from random to knowing. My assumption is that if you aren't knowing, you have to assume that it's all randomness, not creation, although someone can build the car and fix it forever for you to the day you die. Just as the earth provides and fixes and cleans. Rewinding to before life on earth and randomness not being a foe, then it forces you to think of what's probable within intelligible patterns or by randomness. So stars spark randomly, intertwining gravity, swirling gaseous elements. Back again, from matter to life arising randomly to now. Knowing, you and me are at a more precise location than the earth within time and space to begin forming life. Precise meaning more precise is the possibility being less and less probable, the more you exact the probability of it occurring. Predictability. Precisely ready for an event's cause and effect, or precisely causing an effect, is prediction. To be more precise, we haven't even begun doing the right thing. So what do you think happens then? Will randomness randomly emerge attacking us who are knowing, and we can call them Randys, and live a hero versus monster movie? Because they will leap to kill just not to know and remain random, not wanting to be predictable. And since we've deleted the possibility of being random, as everything must be part of a particular intelligible pattern. Knowing can simulate randomness that's predictable, as if you are intelligible, you occur malevolently, as if hyperventilating, claustrophobic, without air to breathe, fighting to occur randomly. The movie is called Knowing, but the writer starts with randomness. Randomness is against knowing. Which viewer are you? You can't know if you're random, or you will begin to occur intelligibly. That's scary, and the scary feeling it gives makes me assume that someone who watched it got scared but doesn't know why, just as I did as a child watching Exorcist. Before you are disillusioned, most of us, I'm guessing, are sent to what scares us. Facing it without the choice is enough to give you concern to disillusion yourself somewhat. Let's go back again to a terraformed planet containing biology within vast infinite space. Many planets could be at a precise location, especially when you consider what the Earth is made of, and the size of the sun, and the temperature that the sun is, and the temp that reaches us, the speed of rotation to clear an atmosphere. That isn't that big of a coincidence, considering lots of rocks spinning around, revolving each star, and each star is bound to have places rocks fit and spin. It isn't much of a coincidence for there to be planets because those are the exact distances from and between the stars a sphere may form as debris is chaotically finding its way, similar to how each faces a sphere to find position instead of arising against those with a position. Randies are meteors floating without placement in the universe, narrowing down to life on a rock with plenty of space for something to form, as all it needs is the basic atomic structure within the dome of protection a planet is. Not highly unlikely. But why are we here on Earth winning the lotto 3 times in a row? Comparing the probabilities of intelligent life covering a planet bound together, ready to create anything from a position to choose from infinite potential to life forming on a planet through randomness. Then compare the first two to what we are, just happening from randomness. That has to be the most improbable possibility to occur through randomness, for it itself is the end of randomness and a planetary leap in evolution. But is evolution just a larger pattern that has infinite amounts of smaller patterns within it? No matter what evolves at a certain leap, it is the same giant pattern that happens all over the universe as randies accumulate as mass and are inevitably forced to start knowing. It's safe to assume that neither calculation is wrong and both are a waste of time, because you've got to randomly appear somewhere. You thinking of such a thing without evolving first to discard it as only seemingly valuable upon discovery, instead of assuming it as an analyzation of recurrence everything depends on, is you being horribly prioritized. Moving forward, randomness intertwines with intelligence, and we are attempting a planetary ascension every whatever cycle, and if sickness spreads, it fails. If we don't fail, the planet grows a new shield to guard its totality of value, which new randomness arises from eventually to be less than the intelligence needed to conquer it. Or is there a velocity doing a different lap other than the revolving that we're knowing? A cycle beyond of what Jafar the Genie has witnessed that you and I cannot witness. Albeit a human is the end of that, mirroring the equations of it mathematically, since we are the most unlikely probability, simultaneously the most probable prediction we can come up with. Do you tremble at that thought? Do you tremble at the thought? You should when it's not necessary, pondering as if you're the one to tell us all what someone probably knows. I tremble because it's not helping the situation. It's that easy. No more sickness and we evolve. Or does it only happen through randomness? Or is something happening through randomness that is a continual neglection of willpower from willpower itself? One possesses a little more than the others. Instead of being patient for it all to come around, we attack the one with more willpower or cast him or her out of the pack so other packs will never accept him or her because of the fear of greater willpower. Greater willpower disappears and those who lack it defer to randomness. Maybe you are random because you have less willpower, as intelligence is provided by willpower's will to know. So some of us haven't forgot we're all together and that willpower's the greatest. Those who have don't know if they are. Therefore, we call the genius genius, as human is a genius. It's a pun. One thought of choosing a future is all that future needs. There are many. Believing one is lesser or greater instead of knowing what the wisest option is becomes a failure in the species. Looking at the failure, then why don't we eradicate the sickness to evolve? We are at a brink. Do we have to identify the exact sickness and put down each of them?